Hi, this is Outdoors writer David Figura, and today I'm with Kevin Mcgowan, who's the project manager for distance learning in bird biology at Cornell University's Lab of Ornithology. Kevin is an expert on a lot of things, and particularly crows, which he has been studying for 32 years. And today, Kevin's going to talk about some things that you probably didn't know about crows. I saw his list and I didn't know these things. So, Kevin, let's get started.
Okay.
What's some interesting facts about crows that people would be surprised to learn about?
Well, one of the things that people don't know is that there are actually almost 50 different kinds of crows around the world. There are just about, depending on how you split the species, there are right around 50 big black birds in the genus Corvus that we call either crows or ravens. And the ravens are usually the big ones and the crows are the little ones, but there are a whole bunch of them all over the world. And we even have 3 here in New York. We have the American crow, which is the caw-caw kind of crow that most of the people know. Then we have the raven, the common raven, which is pretty similar, but bigger. And then we have the fish crow, which is a slightly smaller version of the American crow that is sort of endemic to the southeastern United States and has gradually moved its way up over the 20th century till its breeding in New York.
Wow. So crows, love them or hate them, I mean, people have a variety of attitudes towards crows, but you told me that crows are cooperative breeders?
Yep.
Talk about that. What do you mean?
Okay, so this is a technical term. What it means is they're more than just the parents feeding young at a nest. So there'll be more than 2 birds that are coming to feed at a nest. And I can show you one. Let me pull up a picture here. You don't see many pictures exactly like this because it's kind of hard to do. Crow's nests are really high up in the trees, and so it's hard to get a good view of them. But let me grab this and do this, and now let me share screen with you. Yeah.
So basically, the young are fed by more than just the mother and the father crow.
Yep. And you should be seeing a bunch of the crows here. I tag the crows so that I know who they are, and then I can look at it. Now look at this particular picture. Whoops, sorry.
Wow.
Here you'll see that there are 4 crows with their heads down in one nest. And this is actually the father in the back who just came in and brought food for the nestlings in the nest. This is the mother who's feeding them, and this is a 1-year-old son and a 1-year-old daughter who are watching and trying to take part. And this is a relatively uncommon phenomenon in the bird world. Maybe fewer than 10% of the species of birds in the world do it. But in crows, basically they get into these big families that can be up to 15 individuals in one family. That's mom and dad, and then kids from up to 6 different years that stay home with the parents and help them raise young. This particular family here that has a whole bunch of birds on one roof, they actually were at 15, and then they adopted a neighbor kid. There were so many kids they didn't know. It's like, I don't know, who's this? I don't know, feed him. He's one of the kids somewhere, so.
And you had mentioned that these babies have a unique characteristic. The baby crows have a unique characteristic.
Yeah, baby crows are kind of cool. And this is what a baby crow looks like when they're little. They're born without any feathers on them, hatched out with no feathers, and then eventually get to be pretty good size before they come out of the nest. And this is a baby crow, and notice that it's got a blue eye. And the adults, there's nothing but black. I mean, their eyes are really
Wow.
But they start off blue, and then over the next couple of months, once the kid comes out of the nest, they'll turn dark.
How long do crows live, Kevin?
Well, I've been studying these birds for a long time, and I've usually marked them when they're in the nest. So then I try to follow them through their lifetimes. And we've had 4 birds that have made it to 19 before.
Wow.
Yeah, so getting to 10 is not that big a deal. On average though, most birds don't make it that far. But what we did out once that if they can become a breeder, the females live to be on average 8 and the males 10, but they can make it longer than that. And in fact, captive birds, there's a captive crow that I got a report on once that I think it was 54 years old or something like that, and it was still
54.
Yeah, and so I got told this by
Wow.
it's actually a federal game officer that they found this woman that had this bird, and they confiscated it. And the woman said that she had gotten it as a fledgling, you know, over 50 years ago. And the officer asked me, he said, "Would that be true?" I said, "Well, that'd be like you telling me your grandmother is 110, but it could be true." And he said, "Okay, but I said, but it would look awful." And he says, "Oh, it does."
Hey, you had mentioned in our conversation about crows casting pellets like owls. What do you mean, casting pellets?
They regurgitate pellets. I actually found one on a neighbor's bird bath just like 2 days ago. I'd never told her that they cast pellets too. So, you know, that owls regurgitate a pellet that's about, you know, yay big, that's full of fur and mouse bones. And so that's, if you find a roost where owls roost, there'll be pellets all over the ground. And as a scientist, it's fun to see those because you can pull them apart what they're eating. You know, they'll have a skull in it or bones from a mouse. And in fact, elementary schools use this as a project for their kids, that you can buy owl pellets. Seriously, you can buy sanitized bird barf and play with it with your students to pull it out and find all the mouse bones.
But crows do this too.
Crows do this too. In fact, a whole bunch of birds do this too. You know, owl pellets are probably the most compact and most interesting thing that people hear about, but the crows do it too. And they just, you know, hack up like a cat hacking up or horking up a hairball. It comes up with, and what it is it's mostly indigestible matter. So like the one we opened up the other day had a bunch of seeds in it from something that it ate the fruit, and the seeds were left behind. I think it was sumac. And then some kind of grassy looking stuff, and then some small stones. There are almost always small stones in these things too, because the crows that eat grit like chickens and stuff to help grind up the food in their gizzard. Now,
I've read a lot about how smart crows are. Crows are supposedly a very, very intelligent bird. Can they recognize people and other objects? You know, I mean.
Yeah, that was one of the things that first was shown to me when I started working on these birds. Was I was doing stuff like on campus at Cornell, and I would climb the trees to the nests, and they would not like me. And they would. I used to have a big, long 30-foot extension ladder that I carried around in my car, and the crows got to know that pretty well, and they would chase my car down the street yelling at me. They learned my face, and I mean, I would go walk onto Cornell campus. My office was off campus. And you know, there are thousands of students walking through there, and I would walk into this one family's territory, and they would instantly come over and start yelling at me and mobbing me. And I mean, out of thousands of people. And so I kind of got tired of that. So I decided I was going to try to make some crows like me. And so I started throwing them peanuts, you know, peanuts in the shell, and they like that a lot. And now I have crows that chase my car down the street, so I'll stop and give them peanuts. And they know my car, and they know my face, they know my walk, they know, it's just amazing. There's a guy at the University of Washington, a good friend of mine, John Marsland, did a study with masks where he used like a Dick Cheney mask and a caveman mask, and trained the crows that the caveman was bad. And then it turned out anybody could wear that mask again on campus, University of Washington, and the crows would mob them. And so they did some things, and they figured out, you know, they were looking at the face. But I know my birds know me without seeing my face, and they chase my car. Like they'll chase my car on. I was driving past the lab once. I wasn't even going into the lab, but the family of crows that lives at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, the guy knew my face in my car and everything, and he actually dived off a big pylon while I was driving by the Route 13 right there at 55 miles an hour. He dived off this giant pylon and actually caught up to me when I was passing by, and kind of hovered over my my right fender for a second. That's my car in busy traffic, and I wasn't even going there, and so I stopped and gave him some peanuts.
What do you mean mob? The crows mobbed you. What do they buzz you and fly around your head or dive bomb you? Or
have you ever seen crows mobbing an owl? You know, big bunch of crows, like sometimes, you know, 50 or a couple hundred that'll all come in yelling. And this is what you try to do, I guess, when you're crow hunting, is to attract crows in. Guys use decoys and those calls that sound like an angry crow. And that crow noise that you make with those things is here's a predator. It's either here's a predator, come on, or you dirty predator, I hate your guts. And then everybody hears that and they all come in and say, yeah, we all hate your guts. And so it's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah.
And they get pretty vigorous about it.
And are crows promiscuous, or do they mate for life, or what? You know?
Well, they do mate for life in kind of a way. I mean, we have to understand that when people talk about swans mating for life or eagles mating for life, that doesn't mean your partner dies that you don't get a new mate. Everybody gets a new mate, right? And so crows pretty much do that. We've had a pair once that failed, and then they split, and the male went back to his parents for another year. But mostly once they get paired up, then they're paired for all the time, and they hang out together all year long, and they stay together. That's why crows don't do any sort of courtship type stuff, like, you know, robins sing, and the male cardinal gets up there in the spring and sings his little heart out. Crows don't do that because they don't need to do that. They've been with their mate the whole year long, and they'll start doing getting a little more friendly and do what we call allopreening. Well, they'll kind of groom the back of the other one's head, but that's really about all they do, because they can form a pair bond any time of year. And I've seen birds pair up in fall together through the winter and mate in the spring.
Some people I've talked to don't like crows because they said, you know, they're birders, and they said, oh, they feed on and attack and eat other baby birds. Is that true? Is that true?
Well, they were, sure. Who wouldn't? I mean, tender and juicy. Talk about tender and juicy, little baby. I mean, haven't you ever had squab or anything like that? That's seriously though, but they don't specialize on it, and there are a lot of other things out there that eat a lot more baby birds. And this is always one of the ones that always gets people. Let me share my screen here again and pull up a chart that I have that is from a study that looked at a whole bunch of studies where they put little cameras on birds' nests in a bunch of different forests all over North America. And this is what they found, is that when you look at the proportion of things, it's always, always, always squirrels and snakes. And like you can see here out of this pie chart that over half of the predation events they saw were by snakes or squirrels. And snakes, that's if you're in the South, it's snakes. Up here, it's squirrels, like red squirrels.
Really?
Yep. Chipmunks do the same thing.
Go right in the nest and grab the baby birds. I never knew that. Huh, interesting.
Yeah, it's, let me see, is this, see?
Wow. Darn chipmunks.
Chipmunks, yep. And you can see, actually, if you look at the data here, that out of like 245 events that they looked at, only 3 of them were by crows. And there were actually 2 by white-tailed deer. So crows eat about the same amount of baby birds as white-tailed deer, at least according to this data set.
Amazing, amazing. And do they like eat what they get immediately, or do they store it, or the food that they get?
Well, they actually do store it. There are some birds that store a lot of foods, like blue jays. You can see blue jays carrying acorns in the fall, going places to store them places. And there are even things like the Clark's nutcracker. That's one of the most famous birds out in the Rocky Mountains. It's again a relative of the jays and crows, and they store thousands and thousands of pine seeds to get them through the winter. And it's amazing that what they do. Crows don't do quite like that, but they do like to. They will, if they find a big hunk of food, they want to take a small piece of it, go off and hide it, and so they try to get anything that's food for them hidden before anybody else takes it. And they can store some pretty big things. Let me show you.
What do they eat primarily? It sounds like they're I've just never thought of crows being omnivores, but evidently they are.
Yeah. Here, I'll give you an example of what crows eat. This guy found a slice of pizza. And he actually took it over. I have a sequence of photographs of this guy. He actually took it over into a lawn and he hid it in the lawn. And when they hide things in the lawn, they'll usually like find a leaf and put a leaf on top, or pull up some grass and stick the grass there so that nobody can see it. But they do eat just about anything. Mostly they're foraging in the lawns and on the surface of the soil. So anything you can find in the top couple inches of soil is good, like earthworms. They eat Japanese beetle larvae or other grubs that are in there. If they find a nest of mice, that's a good thing too. They're sort of wannabe predators. They really love meat, but they just don't have the tools to do anything about it. You know, they're both strong. I mean, I don't wear gloves when I handle them. Their feet aren't that strong. They're good scavengers and they're good opportunists.
Well, I've also seen them on garbage day in the city of Auburn.
Yeah, you betcha.
They'll raid an open garbage can pretty quick.
You know, I was years ago when I first started doing this. When I came to Cornell, I was asking permission to climb trees at a place. They were the main garbage haulers, and the guy said, "Sure, you can climb the tree." He said, "You know, people think it's dogs that rip open all those garbage bags, but it's actually crows." And this, I wasn't working on them then. I'd never heard of such a thing. And it's like, I don't believe that. And then sure enough, you know, I drive down the street like about a week later, and there on trash day are crows opening up garbage bags. And they do. They've learned this. I don't think they've taught each other, but they've learned how to do this all over the place. I mean, all over the country. As I say, they're adaptable. They're smart. They can find food where other birds can't.
And you had mentioned in our conversation that previously that crows have, I guess, a dedicated neighborhood watch.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, that's the mobbing thing. So okay. So you have to know that crows have, strangely enough, have the social system that is most like Western human beings, meaning the way we live now, not, you know, primitive, not our forefathers, hunter-gatherer type things, but the way we live now. And let me describe what they have and see if it sounds familiar. As I said, they're made for life. The male and female, they own a territory, and here in central New York is different in other parts of the country, but here in central New York, they maintain a territory all year round. They keep other crows off who aren't their family. Their kids stay with them, but the neighbors don't. And they keep a respectful distance. You know, in the spring, they can fight over territory boundaries, but usually it's pretty amicable. They just get up and talk about it a lot. It's like, I'm still alive, I'm still alive. Bob, are you still alive? And the other guy's like, I'm still alive, don't bother coming over here. And so they know what's going on. And they hear these individual crows around the neighborhood all the time. So they know their voices. We know that there's enough information in the individual cause, just like our voices. There's enough difference between us that people could recognize our voices, and so too can the crows. So you keep your distance, and but if an owl comes or a hawk comes into the neighborhood and comes in to try to do something, it's like your house is on fire. It's like you don't want your neighbors coming in and sleeping on your sofa, right? But if your house is on fire, you would be happy to have them run through the door and help you get out and do that.
Right.
And so when hawks come in, the whole neighborhood is aware they hear, they all come over, they try to take care of it.
Wow, amazing.
And beyond this, they also go off and away from their neighborhood and congregate in areas where there's food, like in fields and things like that. But those field, the crows in those fields turn over every day. I mean, it's like the mall. You know, you go to the mall, there's always a few hundred people there, but it's not the same people every day, and they're coming and going. So they have their family, their neighborhood, and then just the whole community of crows that they socialize with. Sound like us?
Sounds like us. Do crows migrate, or do they stay put all year round in an area?
Well, as I say, here in central New York, the breeding pair owns their territory, and they pretty much stay put all year round. But the offspring who are non-breeders, they can wander, and they will wander. I've had birds that we've tagged here in Ithaca turn up in the roost in Auburn in the winter, and then they come home. You know, they wander around a little bit, they come home. But the birds in Canada, the crows in Canada mostly leave Canada for the winter because it's too cold up there, right? They're smart birds and they know to get out. So when the Canadians come, they actually come here in central New York from the Northeast, from the birds that we've had banded here that have been found in around Montreal and Ottawa up that way. And they go, a lot of them spend the winter here. So a lot of those birds in Auburn in the winter are Canadians, but they go down about as far as the West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania border. And that's where it's sort of the southern limit of their thing. And we've had young birds from our place go down to that turn up down in southern Pennsylvania too, following exactly the same straight line. That if you put a line between here and to Montreal, I mean, it's just a straight line.
Yeah, but those crows that kind of flock and fill like urban areas during the winter, like in Rochester, Albany, Watertown, Auburn, those are migrating crows, right?
Not all of them. Nope, not all of them. A lot of those birds that live in the general area, and they just, instead of sleeping at home through the winter, they'll join in these big roosts. But that's a mixed bag too. We've had some radio transmitters that we were following for a couple of years where the birds were going. And it's like half of them stayed home through most of the winter and half of them went into these big roosts. So you could get enough birds in Rochester to be noticeable, but it would, I forget what they have. Do you remember how many they had? They had like 40,000 or something like that, I think.
Yeah.
They should only have about 15,000 crows to get into a roost like that without migrants. And so the rest of those are almost certainly Canadian crows coming in.
Canadian crows, darn Canadian crows. Well, Kevin, thank you so much. I've learned a lot about crows, and I'm sure everyone listening in has learned a lot as well. So thank you very much. And keep up the crow watch.
Thanks.